The cold stone corridors of the royal palace echoed with the sound of heavy boots. Princess Lyra walked with her head bowed low, her heart pounding in her chest. The once vibrant halls now felt like a tomb, her every step echoing like the final countdown to her death. The air was thick with the scent of incense, masking the bitter tension that hung in the air. Lyra was no longer the beloved heir to the throne, adored by her people. She was now a prisoner, marked for execution by the very empire she was born to lead. Her fate had been sealed by those closest to her, the very people she trusted the most. The royal council had turned against her, accusing her of betrayal and plotting to destroy the empire. The charges were fabricated, yet no one cared for the truth. The only thing that mattered now was that Lyra had become a symbol of rebellion, a symbol that needed to be eradicated to prevent further unrest. As she walked, the guards flanked her on either side, their cold eyes not betraying a hint of emotion. They were nothing more than shadows, obedient to the will of the emperor. Lyra, though once a leader who commanded respect, felt powerless. Each step took her closer to the courtyard where she would meet her end. The princess had been held captive for days, her only company the faint whispers of her loyal servants, who had been taken away one by one. Despite everything, Lyra had remained strong. She had spent the nights staring out the small window in her cell, gazing at the stars. Her thoughts were consumed with memories of her kingdom, the laughter of the people, and the love her parents had shown her before they were taken from her. The last remnants of her old life were slipping away, and soon there would be nothing left but the cold grip of death. She had been betrayed by her closest allies, people who had once sworn to protect her. The palace had turned into a fortress against her, and now it was her final prison. Betrayal. It was the word that repeated in her mind over and over again, like a painful chant. The high walls of the castle loomed ahead, the final barrier between her and the execution she knew awaited her. She had spent years preparing to rule, to lead her people with wisdom and compassion. Yet all of that meant nothing now. She had become a pawn in a game she had never agreed to play. The courtyard came into view, and Lyra felt her stomach churn with dread. The execution ground was a desolate place, stripped of all life and beauty. The execution platform stood at the center, a stark wooden structure surrounded by an ominous silence. The emperor, along with the royal council, was already waiting. The air seemed to shimmer with coldness, as if even the universe was holding its breath for the moment of her demise. Lyra was pushed forward, the cold grip of the guards on her arms, forcing her to keep her head down. As they approached the platform, she could feel the eyes of the crowd burning into her, the whispers of the people stunned like needles against her skin. She could hear their accusations, their disgust at what she had supposedly done. Her heart ached at the thought that her own people believed the lies. But there was nothing she could do now. There was no escape, no way to fight back. Then, amidst the chaos, his eyes met hers. Lyra's breath hitched, and for a moment, the world around her seemed to stop. Through the crowd, she saw him, a human warrior, standing at the edge of the courtyard, watching her with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. His presence felt different, not like the others. He stood tall, his muscular frame draped in dark armor, but it wasn't the armor that drew her attention. It was the way he looked at her. His gaze was not filled with pity, not filled with judgment like the others. His eyes held something far deeper, determination, resolve, and something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. It was as if, in that instant, he was telling her that she was not alone. There was someone who saw her as more than just a condemned prisoner, more than just the daughter of a fallen king. He saw her as a person, a human being, worthy of saving. The moment seemed to stretch on forever, and in that brief exchange, something inside Lyra stirred. She didn't know who he was or what he intended, but she felt a strange connection to him, a silent promise that he would do something to change her fate. The chaos around her seemed to fade into the background as her focus remained on the warrior. And then, a voice shattered the silence. "Execute her. The Emperor's voice echoed through the courtyard, cold and unfeeling. The command was given. The soldiers moved forward, their steps steady and sure, their hands gripping weapons ready for the final strike. But just as they reached her, the warrior made his move. Lyra's heart raced. The tension in the air was unbearable. She didn't know what would happen next, but she could feel a shift, something shifting in the universe, as if this human warrior's fate was now tied to hers. Her story was far from over. The suspense was thick, and as Lyra took one final breath before the unknown, she found herself clinging to the hope that somehow this stranger would become her salvation. The warrior's eyes were locked on the princess as the Emperor's command echoed through the courtyard. His body tensed, and adrenaline surged through his veins. He had made the choice. There was no turning back now. He was no stranger to battle. He had fought in wars, been to the darkest corners of the galaxy, and faced enemies stronger and more dangerous than anything he had ever imagined. But this fight was different. This fight wasn't just about survival. It was about justice, defiance, and saving an innocent life. And for the first time, he felt the weight of something greater than his own existence on his shoulders. The warrior's name was Kale, a soldier from a distant planet. He had wandered the galaxy for years, searching for a purpose. He had seen the cruelty of powerful empires, the suffering of the innocent, and the indifference of those in power. But he had never seen anything like this. He had never seen a princess, a leader, betrayed by her own people. Her execution wasn't just a death sentence. It was a symbol of everything that was wrong in this galaxy. Kale had been in the courtyard for days, quietly observing the princess's fate unfold from the shadows. He had been waiting for the right moment to act. And when his eyes met hers, when he saw the fear and the hope in her eyes, he knew he could not stand idly by. But he had no illusions about the task ahead. There was no easy way out. The Emperor's soldiers were some of the most elite warriors in the galaxy. Strong, disciplined, and ruthless. They would show no mercy. Kale was one man, armed with nothing but his combat skills, his quick wits, and his unshakable determination. He was outnumbered and outgunned. And yet, he didn't hesitate. As the soldiers advanced toward the princess, Kale stepped forward, his boots crunching on the gravel of the courtyard. His movement was swift, and in the blink of an eye, he drew his blade, a gleaming weapon that reflected the harsh light of the sun. He was ready. The first soldier came at him with a roar, swinging a large battle axe. Kale sidestepped, his reflexes honed by years of training, and with one fluid motion, he disarmed the soldier, sending the axe flying through the air. The soldier stumbled, but before he could react, Kale's blade was already at his throat. In a flash, the soldier was on the ground, his life extinguished in an instant. Kale didn't stop to celebrate his victory. He couldn't afford to. The remaining soldiers were closing in, their weapons raised and ready. He darted between them, using the chaos to his advantage. He moved like a shadow, quick and precise, striking with deadly accuracy. But each strike only slowed them down for a moment. For every soldier he took down, two more seemed to take their place. The air was thick with the sounds of clashing metal and grunts of exertion. Kale's muscles burned with the effort, but he pressed on, determined not to let the princess face her execution. He could hear her voice in his head, whispering to him, urging him to fight for her. It gave him the strength he needed to continue, even when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him. But despite his best efforts, Kale was beginning to realize the enormity of the challenge. The soldiers were relentless, and his movements were slowing. His energy was waning, and the warriors around him were starting to notice. They began to work together, surrounding him, cutting off his escape routes. The warrior's instincts kicked in, and he fought harder, using every trick he knew to keep the soldiers at bay. But deep down, he knew that he couldn't keep this up forever. The princess, bound to the execution platform, could see the battle unfold before her eyes. Her heart pounded in her chest as she watched Kale struggle. She had never seen a man fight so fiercely for someone he barely knew. She had always been taught that humans were weak, that they were beneath her kind. But Kale was proving her wrong. Every strike, every blow, was filled with a strength she had never imagined. Kale was getting overwhelmed. The soldiers were too many, and his strength was beginning to fade. But just as the battle seemed lost, a flicker of movement caught his eye. One of the soldiers, the leader of the executioners, was moving toward the platform where Lyra stood. Kale's blood ran cold. If the soldier reached her, it would be the end. She would be executed, and everything he had fought for would be in vain. In a desperate bid, Kale launched himself forward, knocking down 2 soldiers in the process. He sprinted toward the execution platform, his heart hammering in his chest. He had to reach her. He had to save her. As he neared the platform, he could see the soldier raise his weapon, preparing to strike. Time seemed to slow as Kale took one final leap, his body crashing into the soldier just as the weapon came down. The 2 of them tumbled to the ground, and Kale's hands found the soldier's throat. He squeezed, his grip like iron, until the soldier's struggles ceased. Kale stood over the fallen soldier, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. He turned toward the princess, his heart still pounding in his chest. He had made it. Against all odds, he had saved her. But as Kale reached out to free the princess from her restraints, the sound of footsteps echoed through the courtyard. More soldiers were coming, and they weren't far behind. Kale knew his struggle wasn't over. It had only just begun. The princess's fate was still in his hands. Kale stood panting, his breath coming in short gasps, his blade still dripping with the blood of the fallen soldiers. He had managed to break through the line, but the fight was far from over. The princess, Lyra, stood before him, her eyes wide with gratitude and disbelief. Her chains had been broken, but there was still so much fear in her gaze. She knew the escape was not yet complete. Kale wiped the sweat from his brow, glancing around the courtyard. The once chaotic scene now seemed to quiet, if only for a moment. The princess, her hands still trembling, stepped toward him. But just as she moved, a loud, clanging sound echoed from the gates. "Reinforcements!" one of the remaining soldiers shouted. Kale's heart sank. He had known it was coming. There had been no way to fight off the entire royal guard. They were too many, and his strength was wearing thin. The soldiers were regrouping, surrounding the courtyard, and the gates were beginning to creak open. Kale turned to the princess. "We need to move," he said, his voice low but urgent. "This isn't over. Not yet." But Lyra hesitated. Something was off. She could feel it. And it wasn't just the soldiers regrouping outside the gates. It was something more personal, something far more dangerous. A presence, a feeling that she could not explain, but that seemed to tighten around her chest like a vice. Before Kale could react, a cold voice rang out, commanding and terrifying. "Stop." Both Kale and Lyra froze, their eyes darting toward the voice. Standing in the shadows at the edge of the courtyard was a figure that neither of them had anticipated. Tall, imposing, with a dark cloak billowing around them. The stranger stepped into the moonlight. The figure's face remained hidden, but the aura surrounding them was unmistakable. This was no ordinary soldier or commander. This was someone far more powerful, someone who had been waiting for this very moment. "Who are you?" Kale demanded, his hand instinctively moving to the hilt of his blade. The figure took another step forward, and at that moment, the air around them shifted. There was something undeniably alien about the figure, something that didn't belong in the royal courtyard of a human empire. "I am not your enemy," the figure said softly, almost cryptically. "I am your ally. If you want to survive tonight, you will listen to me." Lyra's pulse quickened. The figure's words seemed to have an otherworldly weight to them, pulling her in. This was no ordinary soldier, and no simple escape was possible. The truth was dawning on her with every passing second. There was more at play here than Kel could ever have imagined. Kel's grip tightened on his sword. "What do you mean, ally? Are you with the Emperor?" The figure shook their head. "No, I am not with the Emperor, and I am not here to take sides. I am here to stop the execution, but for a different reason." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. "What reason?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The figure stepped into the light, revealing their face, a being not entirely human, with glowing eyes and a strange, intricate tattoo-like marking running across their face. It was then that Lyra understood. The figure wasn't just an ally. They were one of her own people, or something far beyond them. The figure spoke again, this time with urgency. "You are in danger, Lyra. The Emperor's plans are more than just about you. They're about controlling all of humanity and beyond. If you stay here, if you try to run, you will lead them right to the key to their victory." Lyra's heart pounded. She could barely comprehend the words coming from the figure's lips, but she knew there was truth in them. She looked to Kel, who was still standing by her side, uncertainty clouding his face. "What is this?" Kel asked, his voice growing more intense with each passing moment. "Who are you really?" The figure paused, as if deciding how much to reveal. "I am Nyx, a descendant of the ancient guardians who protected this world long before your people arrived. And I am the one who has been waiting for you." Kel's grip on his blade loosened, confusion swirling in his mind. "What are you talking about? Lyra's life is in danger. How does any of this relate to her survival?" Lyra's heart raced as she turned to Nyx. "What do you mean, waiting for me? I don't understand." Nyx's eyes softened, the glow fading slightly. "You were always meant for more than the throne. Your lineage goes back far beyond even the Emperor's family. The true power lies within you. The power to reshape the future of this galaxy. But for that to happen, you must survive tonight. You must leave everything you've known behind. And you must trust me, because without me, the Empire will fall, and with it, the entire galaxy." The words hit like a thunderclap. Lyra's mind spun with disbelief. She had always been taught that she was destined for the throne, for rule, for glory. But this was something she had never imagined. Power beyond her comprehension, the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance, and all of it tied to her. Kel looked between Lyra and Nyx, still processing everything. His face was hard, but a new resolve started to take root within him. He had promised to protect her, but now it seemed that his role was greater than just being her savior. He had to protect her for the sake of everything. For the galaxy, for their future. "What now?" Kel asked, his voice filled with the weight of this newfound truth. Nyx's eyes met his with a knowing look. "Now we make sure that Lyra survives. If she dies tonight, everything dies with her." The twist was clear now. This wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a fight for the future itself. The tension in the courtyard was unbearable. The clash of metal and the cries of the fallen soldiers had faded into a quiet stillness, broken only by the heavy breaths of Kel and the distant murmurs of the retreating enemy. The realization had just begun to sink in. The battle wasn't over, not yet. But now it wasn't just about saving Lyra. It was about something far more important, the survival of a future that none of them could yet fully understand. Lyra stood at Kel's side, her face pale but determined, the glow of the moonlight casting eerie shadows over her expression. She had always thought of herself as the princess, destined to rule and command. Now she was no longer sure of who she was, or what she was meant to do. The revelation of her true lineage, the power within her, was both a gift and a curse. How could she bear the weight of such a destiny? Kel turned to her, his eyes softening as he saw the turmoil in her face. He had seen battles, wars, and losses, but nothing compared to the weight of seeing the princess who had once been so sure of herself, now grappling with the consequences of the truth. He stepped closer, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You are not alone in this," Kel said, his voice steady and calm. "I will be by your side, no matter what happens next. We'll face this together." Lyra looked up at him, her heart full of gratitude. For the first time, she wasn't just a princess. She was a person, someone who had found someone who truly cared. The sense of isolation she had carried for so long began to fade as she found strength not only within herself, but also in the man who stood beside her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "I don't know what to do. I don't know if I can carry this burden." "You don't have to carry it alone," Cale reassured her. "The fight isn't over, but we've already won something far more important." The sound of footsteps approaching interrupted their moment. Nyx, the mysterious figure who had revealed so much, now stood before them. The glow in his eyes had dimmed, but the urgency in his voice was palpable. "We don't have much time," Nyx said. "The Emperor has sent his elite enforcers. If we don't move quickly, they'll track us down before we can escape the palace. And once they do, they won't hesitate to finish what they started." Cale glanced at Lyra, his jaw tightening. There was no turning back now. He had promised to protect her, and he would see it through, no matter the cost. "We'll leave," Cale said firmly, determination in his eyes. "We'll leave tonight, and we won't stop until we're safe. We'll go wherever it takes to make sure they can't hurt you." Lyra nodded, her resolve strengthening. She wasn't just running for her life anymore. She was running for her future. The galaxy was bigger than the confines of the throne she had once been destined for. There was a larger battle to be fought, and she was finally ready to face it. With Nyx leading the way, the trio slipped through the palace gates, making their way to the hidden underground passage. The dark tunnel seemed endless, but it was their only chance for escape. Lyra's heart raced as she felt the weight of their steps echoing off the stone walls. Every moment that passed was another moment the Emperor's forces could close in on them. She glanced at Cale, his expression set with unyielding focus. The passage opened into the wilderness beyond the palace grounds. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie light over the desolate land. Cale scanned the area, his instincts kicking in. They were not safe yet. "We need to move quickly," he said, his voice sharp with urgency. "Nyx, do you have a plan?" Nyx nodded, his expression grim. "We have a ship nearby, but it's not going to be easy. The Emperor's enforcers will be scouring the area for any sign of us." "Then we move fast," Cale said, already leading the way into the darkness. "We don't have time to waste." As they traveled through the night, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig underfoot made her heart jump. They were in enemy territory, and the only thing that stood between them and certain death was their speed and their will to survive. By the time the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, they had reached the abandoned outpost where the ship awaited them. The ship was a sleek, low-profile vessel, perfect for evading detection. Cale stepped forward, his eyes scanning the surroundings one last time. "This is it," he said, turning to Lyra and Nyx. "We're getting out of here, no matter what." As they boarded the ship, Cale's hands moved swiftly over the controls, initiating the launch sequence. The engines hummed to life, and the ship began to rise, slowly at first, before gaining speed and altitude. Lyra watched as the palace, once her home, now her prison, grew smaller and smaller beneath them. It was then, as the ship soared into the unknown, that Lyra understood the magnitude of the journey ahead. She wasn't just running from the Emperor. She was running toward something greater. She was running toward freedom, toward her destiny, toward a future that no longer held the confines of a throne. And by her side, she had the one person who had shown her that even in the darkest of times, there was still hope. Cale wasn't just a warrior. He was her protector, her ally, and her friend. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, because in the end, they had won something far more important than a battle. They had won the chance to build something new, something stronger, something that would change the galaxy forever. The journey was just beginning, but Lyra felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had her strength, she had Cale, and with Nyx by their side, they were ready to face whatever the future held. In the end, they weren't just escaping the Emperor's tyranny. They were claiming their future.